right in this district, so that's not an issue. Financial returns only shall not be considered as a basis for granting the variance, and that has not been identified as a reason for requesting the variance. Number 5, the alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person having an interest in the property after the effective date of the ordinance, and creation and size of the lot as well as the house placement were not done, not completed by the applicant. Number 6, granting a variance requested will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that's denied by the ordinance to other land, structures, or buildings in the same district. There have been similar requests within this neighborhood through the years. At 406 Spring Hill Drive was approved for a 5-foot rear setback variance for a sunroom back in January of 2000, and at 801 Bromley Court was actually denied a 12-foot rear setback variance for a covered deck in June of 09. So there's been approvals and denials both within this general area in this neighborhood for similar requests. The variance is the minimum that will make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure. Staff finds that in order to utilize the rear yard with any additional building square footage, the requested setback variance may be the minimum to make possible the reasonable use of the land or building because of the placement of the house on the lot. Number 8, the granting of the variance will not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other property or improvements in the area. We would find that would not be detrimental to the public welfare. Number 9, the proposed variance will not impair adequate supply of light and air to adjacent property, increase congestion in public streets, increase the danger of fire, endanger public safety, or diminish or impair property values. And we find that this variance would not create any of those effects. Number 10 is not applicable. Conclusion, staff does find this property is relatively level and rectangular in shape. The house is constructed with the garage extending forward from the main house, which has the effect of creating a small rear yard. House was also built when the R3 district had a 40-foot minimum setback, which pushes the house 5 feet further back than it would be today. There is a public utility and drainage easement in the rear yard. It doesn't really affect the placement of the covered deck because it's would want it to be within that easement. It's a recommendation of the Public Works Department that the applicant amend the plat to remove the easement. Since the ditch was moved to the adjoining property to the rear and the easement is actually no longer needed. This would allow for the deck to be covered if the BZA finds that there is sufficient hardship to grant the variance request. The hardship noted by the applicant is the extreme narrowness of the rear lot and the easement occupying the entirety of the rear lot. Within your packet on the applicant did submit some pictures that show kind of what's the area, the rear yard, and kind of the reasoning behind the request. And actually there's a picture of the ditch that's actually on the adjoining property. And the rear, it's not a part of the rear yard now. I did take a couple pictures today. This is just of the front of the house. This shows again kind of the where the house or the garage extends quite a bit further in front of the main part of the house, and this kind of shows it a little bit better. Which again kind of has the effect that the actual living part of the house for the most part is quite a bit further off of the road than it could have been. And then this is just an aerial photograph. This is also in your packet, but this is the aerial photograph showing the lot and where the house is on the lot. I also did include on here, we do have the plat itself. Their lot 39, which would be the top left lot, is where there would be. And again, that does show that basically the entirety of the rear setback of the house of the property is within an easement, which again is it's a 20-foot total easement with a 20-foot rear setback. So,
okay. Any questions?
All I've got.
Any questions for Kevin? I've got a couple, Kevin.
Okay.
So, just to kind of restate some of the things you've already said. So their house is 22 feet from the property line. There's a 20-foot easement. So there's only technically 2 feet outside the easement today.
Yes.
The Public Works Directors recommended and this is a question, the applicant to modify the plat to remove the easement, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so they could come at a later time and submit a plat adjustment
Just a
or
plat
whatever.
amendment to remove the
And would it
easement.
be to completely remove that easement or just reduce it?
Well, his recommendation would be to remove it because the easement is not actually in use. There's no
Okay.
utilities in it whatsoever. All it ever was a drainage easement. It's a little difficult to see on the drawing, but on the very southernmost lot on their side of the street, which is lot 37, there's a pipe that comes underneath the road there, and it basically comes down from that and then flows northward in the back of all three of the lots and extends eventually to the creek that goes, or Rock Springs branch that goes underneath Spring Hill Drive. These three lots, and then there's a couple other lots it affects. But, however, during the construction of this development, there was basically the ditch got moved out of the easement onto the adjoining property owner. And I don't know, this was all predates my time here, I don't know any details beyond that, but that is what happened. And so that ditch is not actually located within the easement.
Okay.
And so it's not necessary any longer from a stormwater perspective because there's no ditch there for the city to even maintain, so.
Okay, so purposes of our discussion, we can essentially ignore the public works policy at this point with the direction that they should modify the plat to just remove it in the future so we don't even
Exactly.
have this issue.
Right.
But there is still a variance needed because of the 20-foot setback.
Right, they want to be,
Gotcha.
basically, there's a 20-foot setback because when they add the cover over the deck, it becomes a part of the house. And so they have to meet the 35 front, the 10 side, and the 20-foot rear setback requirements.
Gotcha.
And so they want to
Okay.
be about 9 feet off that rear property line.
So should we be considering a 9-foot total, right? Or is it 11?
It's an 11-foot variance, I'm sorry. They want to be at 9 feet off the property line.
So
Yeah,
11
because-
foot.
Yeah,
So-
because the deck is 12 feet into the, off the house, which is 10 feet into the line, and the cover would be a foot more than the deck. So,
So a 9-foot variance.
right. Well, 11-foot variance for a 9-foot setback.
Gotcha,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
gotcha. Y'all hear that, 11-foot variance, 9-foot setback, okay. Any other questions for Kevin?
You know, I think I've got one. Back on number 6 on the standards, we're talking about granting a variance previously. Back when there was a denial, that was way back in January of 2000. At that point where it said that 801 Bromley Court, it was denied a rear setback variance for a covered deck, which is the same exact thing. 22 years ago, was that because that easement had not been moved and was still necessary, and now that's changed?
I don't think that particular lot had an easement. That's on a different street than this.
It's not one of these houses.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not one of these houses. It's in the same general neighborhood, the Hunters Point neighborhood there.
And there was no easement behind that, that's just simply because it had a 20-foot setback period.
Right,
Well,
right.
Could've also been there was no hardship, right? We don't know
Right.
why it was denied, but they
Yeah.
may not have had an easement.
And that's
at
what
all.
I'm trying to get at, is there's a reason for
Yeah.
that that's similar to
Yeah.
this.
That was the one back in 2009,
Right.
though.
Yeah.
That wasn't the 22 years ago, that was one that was 13
Yeah, that
years
was
ago.
That was in 2009.
The 2009.
Oh, sorry,
That was
oh, I
the
see, it's at the
2000.
bottom.
Yeah.
I see that now.
Yeah.
It
Okay,
jumps.
sorry, I saw that date
Yeah.
first, sorry.
All right, if there's no more questions for Kevin, we will close the Board of Zoning Appeal and open a public hearing for anyone who would like to speak for or against this request. If you would like to speak for the request, please state your name and address for our record, please.
My name's Lori Hughes. I'm the owner of 17 St. Francis Avenue. Yes, a lot of me's explained a lot of it already. I do know that when I purchased the home back in '95, I was told by all of my neighbors that at one time there was a ditch when this house was being built. Like literally, the owner had to could look out the window, and the ditch was there. And they petitioned to have this ditch moved, and it was moved to the adjacent property. I want to say it was. It's never been there since I've lived there. since 95. I do know that in 90, we built the deck in 98, so sometime between 97 and 98, we woke up one spring morning on spring break to lots of jackhammers and lots of commotions out there with the ditch. So I am a nosy owner, so I did go out there and ask, and it was John and Torsia had hired this crew because when he was building, he was the major builder, I guess, of this subdivision. And when he built it, and he did have knowledge that the ditch was moved, and when he built it, he had built it not deep enough when he built this ditch and put it on the adjacent property. And because there were new phases of the subdivision being open, he had to go back in and widen this ditch and deepen the ditch.
Essentially make it handle more water.
So, like I said, it's never been there since we didn't even really know was there, when we bought the house, didn't even really realize we were on an easement until we constructed the deck in 98, and that's when our contractor at that time, said, oh, well, there's an issue because you're on this easement, and I had to go in front and, get basically a variance to have it built. And they came out, looked at our property, and I have the letter and everything where they did grant that.
I think it's in our packet.
Yeah.
It is.
Okay,
So,
great. Any questions for Ms. Keys? No, all right, thank you.
thank you.
Anyone else that would like to speak for or against? Not seeing anyone, we will close the public hearing, reopen the Board of Zoning Appeals for discussion. When we look at these items, there's always, depending on what the request is, there's 8 or 10 different factors that we have to consider to determine whether or not there's justification for an approval or a denial. And unfortunately for you, in this case, you've got about 3 or 4 items that apply. So you've got, even without the easement helps, but even without the easement, you've only got 2 feet of property you can essentially use. So that definitely is a factor. One of the other items is it cannot be something that you yourself have created. Obviously, you didn't create the placement of the house on the lot. And then, of course, our setbacks have changed. We now only require 35-foot setback. So had this house built today, it would be at least 5 foot closer, or could be at least 5 foot closer to the road. So that would have given you an additional 5 feet back. So there's several factors that are at play for your request. I don't know if the rest of the other board members have any comments or questions, but I think I didn't mention, but I'm assuming you understand the conversation about having the plat adjusted to remove the easement if you want to. Unless you're going to build something, it's not something you necessarily have to do, but it would, if you get it removed, then it kind of takes it out of the conversation in the future. Anything from you guys, Scott or Phil?
I mean, listening to you, Chairman, sounds like you're seeing a hardship on the extreme narrowness. There's only 2 feet of space back there. And obviously, there was an approval before. I mean, I got the date wrong before, but this time,
Yeah.
I will get that date right, and it was a 5-foot rear setback variance. Like you said, if it were different, it would only be 35 feet back. That's 5 more back, so.
Right.
I find it reasonable, I do. Based on everything you said, I agree. I think the extreme narrowness of this rear lot and all that trouble having only 2 feet of space is, one of the spirits of what we do is to try to allow people to enjoy their property. You can't do a lot with 2 feet. You couldn't even both stand there together, so I see that, I would like to go ahead and just move for approval of this request with the staff comments here. And due to hardship noted by the applicant to the extreme narrowness of the rear lot and the easement occupying the entirety of the rear lot.
All right, we have a motion for approval. Do we have a second?
Do we have to cover the 11 and the 9, or are we good?
You probably should state it with the 9-foot, 11-foot
allow a
variance,
9
9-foot setback.
Right, allow 9-foot setback,
So,
11-foot variance,
You
right?
want to restate that?
Yes, approve the request to allow a rear setback variance of 11 feet.
All right, we have a motion
I will second.
and a second. All those in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. It's approved. Thank you. That is the only item on our agenda for new business today. The next item we have is staff comments or other business.
Don't have anything.
And you never seem to have anything. I'd like for you to one time come with something.
I will say congratulations to Mitch. He's not here tonight because he got married last weekend
Yep.
and he's on his honeymoon. So-
Yeah, I saw on Facebook a
Congratulations, yeah.
picture, and
Yeah.
he definitely outkicked his coverage. That's awesome. So, thanks, Kevin, and if there's nothing else, we will stand adjourned. Camera's off, and I think the mics are dead.